I mean, it sounds like there's so much going on.
I can
How are
relate
you
to that.
doing? Yeah, how are you doing?
Man, the short answer is, um, in the final analysis, okay.
Okay.
Maybe I might say no worse for the wear because there's been, especially in the last, what's today, Friday? So the last 4 or 5 days, there's been more adrenaline than I really care to have pumping through the body. But
Mm,
the reality is, see, I say it like that because it used to be I couldn't see that things were really okay when there were lots of difficult things going on. It
yep.
used to be when something difficult was going on, or something that, especially if it felt threatening, or that was something that I couldn't manage or couldn't do anything about. The sense of things was that, oh no, what am I going to do? There's a threat. This is bad, and that's all I could see. And
Mm,
then over the last so many years, I don't know how long, and of course, since you and I've been working together, this has um, developed even further. That things can be going on that are disturbing or threatening or uncomfortable, and I can see, and sometimes I have to stop and look, but I can at least see that everything is truly fundamentally okay. It's just there's okay, and then there's stuff over the top of it.
yeah. Yeah.
So that's what's going on now. Is
That's
I'm okay,
amazing.
but there's a lot of stuff going on over the top of it, and as a result, I discovered some new things. I found some. Um, I don't know if they're beliefs. I'm not sure what they are, but I found some. I guess you could call them operating programs, background programs that
Yeah.
I hadn't been aware of before.
Excellent. Like
So,
what?
well, the big one, and I keep for days. I've been meaning to write about all this stuff so I don't lose track of it. So
Mhm.
there's some other things, but those are for the time being lost. But I discovered, as one particular situation was unfolding over the last week, that I I'm just going to say it honestly, even if it's not exactly the most accurate or true statement. I do not have the ability to deal with being helpless or powerless.
Yeah.
If I feel like I'm helpless and powerless, it sets something off.
Yeah.
And the adrenaline starts, and I start trying to do things to manage. That was something else that came up that I discovered, and I'm not sure what to do with this one exactly. You know, back when we were doing the deep dive group with the other two,
Mhm.
uh, you'd asked me about what was behind um, the fact that I couldn't sit still, that I had a tendency to always be getting up and doing
Yeah.
things. Um, while that has changed some, it's still there. And I noticed yesterday or the day before, we had a situation going on, and I became really upset. And
Mhm.
so I walked away from the situation back here, and I didn't sit down in the chair. I started cleaning the room.
Mm.
And when it happened, I realized what was going on. It's like, oh, you're upset. And so your way of dealing with it is to start cleaning. Now, I didn't get any further with that. I was too rattled at the time to start to look more deeply into it. But I at least saw that much, and that was enough of a kind of a footnote that I could refer back to it later, and dig into it and find, okay, so what's going on there?
Yeah, exactly. So when you are, doing that, you're upset and you're moving. I mean, there are a couple things probably at play, right? First and foremost, it is just a visceral distraction from the body. So, like you said, you
Hmm.
have this adrenaline dump. There's a feeling when you have adrenaline there that like you have to do something about it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's an immediate assumption that if I'm feeling adrenaline in the body, first of all, it means that there is something wrong. So we take that as being proof because I feel adrenalized that there must actually be danger here or something that I need to react to. Also, just the feeling of adrenaline in the body is sort of inherently uncomfortable, right? Like even people who are like adrenaline junkies and they jump out of airplanes and go on roller coasters and stuff, what do they do while they're doing it? They scream.
Yeah.
It's like I want to do it because it's so uncomfortable. There's still so much inherent intensity to that feeling of being adrenalized that we release it in some way. So, barring, I'm assuming that you don't just scream. in in a general situation. So what do? We move the body. We get out and we, are active in some way to try to kind of burn that off and distract from the fact that we're feeling really amped up right now.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
the the thing is, adrenaline is not it doesn't take a long time to work its way out of the body. It's not like it's there for hours when you have, something happens. It's not like it's just, continually being produced for hours. It's a short response. So if you can take that time when you are feeling like you've just gotten bad news or something has happened and you feel that adrenaline in the body, you feel the urge to get up and start cleaning, or you recognize that you are currently cleaning, feel what's in the body, feel that stress, that hyperactivity, that energy. And that's a moment where you can just for a moment, can I hold space, be bigger than even this turbulence in the body? You
Hmm.
can, for one thing, notice that this does not actually have any relevance to the situation, right? Like adrenaline is basically for when we are in physical danger. It,
Okay.
it gives us that ability to fight or flee, right? When you get bad news about somebody's health or somebody isn't complying with what you want them to do or anything else that happens that's just purely emotional or psychological in nature, that adrenaline isn't actually functional in this moment. It's not really causing you to like run out of the room or beat the person up. It's an old reaction to a mental perceived stress, to a mental, it's an emotional danger, not a physical danger. So you're experiencing a physical response to a perceived emotional danger or threat, right? Like your idea of you can't allow you see, like you can't handle it if you feel helpless, right? That helpless is an emotional, mental helplessness. Nobody has like physically restrained your arms and bound you in the chair and is like holding you hostage in that moment, right? That
Right.
helplessness is that Tex isn't doing what you want her to do, or that you can't control a certain situation. You feel in some way helpless based on the conditions of the situation, but you are not physically helpless in this situation, right? It's an emotional
Yeah.
helplessness. It's a psychological helplessness.
Although I wonder about one thing.
Yeah.
One situation, the biggest one, has been that she's refusing to go to school. And in the state of Texas, surprise, surprise, they have some pretty draconian responses.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's a case of she's not going, and we only have so long of her not going before the state starts taking action against us. And if they start doing that, there's nothing that we can do, or very little we can do. I mean, we could get a lawyer, but I don't know how much good that would do when you're going up against the state. Point is that forces are coming into play that, as best as I can tell, I really can't. I can respond. I can try to do things, but it's kind of a juggernaut. It's still going to go. It's still going to roll over us regardless. And so that to me feels very helpless and powerless. Like you're completely you've been neutered. You know.
Which we can talk about in a minute, but it's still
Okay.
proving the point that
Okay.
it's not a physical situation. They are not
Hmm.
physically restraining you or rolling over you, or, there's no physical danger involved. So it's not a situation that you can physically remove yourself from, that the
I
adrenaline
see.
is
Okay.
not actively, you're not like taking Tex and like carrying her off to school physically. Like that, that adrenaline isn't able to actually fulfill a purpose in
I
this
see.
regard,
Okay.
right? It's
It's
it,
it's that analogy I gave you a while back of it's like being in the car with your foot on the gas and the brakes at the same time.
yeah, 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 yeah. This is something where the problem is the mind can't tell between real danger and imagined danger, and it can't tell between like a psychological danger and a physical danger, right? You are responding the same to a bear crashing through your door as you are to the idea of the state coming in and, interfering in some way. So
Right.
the body is gearing up to fight in the same way, regardless of circumstance,
I
even
see.
though you're not literally going to like, take up fists when the truant officer comes to the door, right?
Right.
So it's what we want to look at is the the actual physical response to this adrenaline response, useful in the case of a bear attack, not useful in the case of the state coming in and interfering with, parenting and all of that. It's not to say that it's going to keep it from happening, but there's an immediate assumption when it happens that you are in the kind of danger that you think you would be in if a bear was coming through the door,
Huh.
right? You
Yeah,
you
I suppose so.
you take that adrenaline response to be the proof of actual danger. There's actual threat here.
Huh. Okay. I
So,
see.
so the first thing you want to do is to recognize in that situation that yes, there might actually be something here to consider, and you do have to sort something out because there are laws at play and things might happen. But the response to that, all of the discomfort that you have in the body that drives you to behave in a certain way that's not conducive to helping anybody. It's not conducive to the situation. Cleaning the house is wonderful, but not just because Tex isn't going to school. Like the two do not connect, right? It's not to say that it's not great to clean the house, but that you doing that as a habitual unconscious response to the stress of her not going to school and the thought about what that will be. You don't need um, to act out these behaviors just to distract from something that's happening in the body, basically.
Okay.
So you get information, something happens, you feel this adrenaline response. First thing, recognize that this response, this feeling of adrenaline, does not directly relate to my actual circumstances. I am not in physical danger. You can tell yourself, that's where we talk about I am safe. Look around your room and confirm I am safe. There is no bear coming through that door. There are a lot of dogs, but there are no bears.
So you said the adrenaline does not directly relate to the circumstance?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's gearing you up for, being in the woods and having an attack with being attacked by some sort of dangerous animal and trying to get away or fight it. But it has nothing to do with a daughter who isn't going to school.
Okay.
But there's an association there that anytime you feel this response, anytime you feel this helplessness, there's this, I have to do something to escape. Well, it's not relevant in this situation. That helplessness, A, not a physical helplessness, but B, not even a real helplessness the way that it's being perceived. Because the problem is with all of these things, they turn back on us all the time.
Turn back on us.
Yeah. So it's self-reflective. Um, in the situation with Tex, for instance, you're concerned that, the state is going to step in and something is going to happen. But
Right.
but there's still, and I know that you are also concerned about how this is going to affect her and all of that. And I'm not taking
Right.
any all of that. But the helpless feeling that you have makes it self-referential. You are feeling helpless in this situation, and that becomes the most important thing in that moment.
Yeah. You're right. Okay.
So we really have to look at is, am I concerned for her? Am I concerned for the greater picture of, what this means in her life going forward or something else? And how much of my concern in this situation is actually just self-referential? How much am I concerned about me or feeling the discomfort that I'm feeling based off of my own, traumatic triggering that's happening anytime I'm in a situation where I don't feel like I have full control, or that big mythological authority in the sky is, cracking down on me and I'm powerless to do anything against it.
Well, it's interesting you say self-referential, but what you described to me, if I was going to just be really direct about it, I would say it sounds self-centered.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all of that selfish stuff is, self-related stuff is always self-centered. It's
Right.
always,
Well, I just wanted to say that because I'm
yeah.
sorry to cut you
No,
off, but
yeah.
self-referential, it seems like it's kind of putting a good face on it. And I'd
Yeah.
rather
No,
just be honest with myself, like, okay, you're being self-centered.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. I am using maybe a more diplomatic framing of it, but I appreciate
Yes.
your honesty. Yeah. That's the thing with all of our self-related stuff, though. It is all self-centered. I
Hmm.
said that about, all the anxiety that I had back in the day. Anxiety was always self-referential or self-centered. It was always, well, I think, I'm worried about what that person is going to do to me. I'm worried that, like the one I bring up all the time is I remember parking next to a car that had a scratch on it. And my immediate thought is, does that person know that the car already was scratched, or are they going to think I scratched it because I'm parking next to it? It was like me at the center of everything. And it's all that self-centered. I am the center of everybody else's universe. And that's all of that comes from. And this is not quite as egregious maybe as that sort of a thing, but it's because we're constantly relating to it's not it's not really we're not really relating to the moment the way it is. We're relating to it through all of the filters of conditioning that we've had since we were, infants or before.
Oh,
So all of your conditioning about authority figures come
mhm.
into play every time you are dealing with a perceived authority and every time you are the perceived authority.
Whoa, hold on a minute. It comes into play not just when I'm dealing with a perceived authority, but when I'm in the role of authority as well.
Of course, you hate being in the
Wow.
role of authority, right? Well,
Say
why
that again.
you've said before you're not comfortable being in the role of an authoritarian.
Do not care for it.
And why would that be? It's because there is an association there with authority, which goes way, way, way back, and
I
it's
see.
coloring both sides of it.
In other words, it's seeing yourself becoming that thing that you resent.
Exactly.
Okay. Wow.
So yeah. So there's no way to have a clean, unfiltered view of any moment or any interaction. There's something that's always going to be coloring it because we are a product of our programming and our conditioning.
Huh.
So the best we can do is to recognize that that is happening in the moment and recognize that, oh, this is just that program going again. This is not actually real on the face of it. It's not verifiable from the external viewpoint that like I am absolutely in danger here. Somebody else would walk into the room and see you sitting there and not immediately perceive you being in the danger that you think you're in.
I see. Okay. Hmm.
So we can kind of talk ourselves down off the ledge when that first happens with the I am safe, it's okay. You can breathe, you can feel the body and feel the adrenaline and feel all of that stuff that's trying to move you to fight or to run away. And then just hold the space for it to just play it out because it's just a chemical reaction. We don't have to make more of it than it is. We know it's biology. We know you get startled by something and the dump of chemicals hits the system, and then you have all of these very predictable experiences in the body that come with, a shot of adrenaline.
That association has gone on for so long and has happened in so many situations, many of which were truly scary as hell, that
Yeah.
it's hard not to have that sense. It's, sometimes it shows up in the mind in actual words. A lot of times it doesn't. It's just sort of a nonverbal understanding or awareness that this feeling, this adrenaline, is it's hard not to interpret that literally and really believe that there is something going on, especially like when earlier this week when Susanna got the news about the blockages in her heart, you
Yeah.
know.
Sorry to hear about that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I can tell you more about that later. It's fortunately
Mhm.
not as dire as it appeared to be at the front.
Good.
Um, but at any rate, so we have something like that going on, and you've got this adrenaline, and it's hard not um, to
Yeah.
understand that as, yeah, there's something going on here that really warrants being concerned. You know,
So you just gave an example though of why you can undercut that
okay,
because it turned out to not be as dire as it initially seemed when you got the information.
right.
So your initial response is to an imaginary scenario. You hear that she has these blockages. So
Mhm.
the you're not responding to the you're not responding to the reality of what is going on in her heart because you don't actually know what's going on in her heart. You
Mm.
know the term that they have given you, right? The diagnosis that they've given
Mhm.
you. And then you know all of your immediate associations of what that might mean. And that escalates often very quickly in our mind as to
Mm.
how, what are the further ramifications of this? How bad can it get? What do I need to be wary of? And then it's just super, super fast. We are
Yeah.
now experiencing the full gamut of calamity. Instead, what you've actually found is that that was an overreaction to the current situation. Now that you've gotten more information, you found out it's not quite as dire as it was. You have responded to a bunch of thoughts about it, but not to the actuality of whatever it is in her heart in this moment.
So how does a person deal with that kind of thing when in that initial period of time you don't know all these things that you find later? You just have this information, and you would say to somebody if they said, well, I don't think there's any reason to worry. You'd say, well, are you out of your mind? I mean, did you hear what I told you?
Well,
So how do we deal with that? How do we,
yeah,
to use the word used a minute ago, how do we undercut that?
yeah. Well, what is worrying actually doing for you in that situation?
Oh, absolutely nothing.
Okay, so
Well,
so
nothing good.
no, exactly. There's no, it's not to say that like somebody gets a cancer diagnosis. It's not to say, oh, well, okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm not just not gonna do anything about it. I'm just gonna, that's fine. I'm sure it's not,
Right.
it's not that, right? But instead of quickly escalating up the chain of how bad is it and what kind of treatment are we going to do and what if the treatment doesn't work and what side effects are they going to have, and we go through all of that before we have any more information about it. So instead,
Or,
what we say is take it at the level that it is. So she's told that she has some sort of blockage in the heart or something in the heart. End of story for right now. We need more information. What can we do about it? What information can we get to, like what is the next testing? Where do we go from here? All of that still useful information to know and to deal with, but you will probably still get that initial flush of, oh no, diagnosis.
right.
But that's where you don't let the mind escalate. Don't jump to anything beyond what is here in the known room, because we will always go much, much worse than it will likely be.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And we will, each time that we escalate and we create a new thought about it and we entertain this alternative, we're reinforcing the stress. We're creating more of that adrenaline and we're feeling more and more helpless and we're just making it, a deeper and deeper hole for ourselves. So you come back to what is actually here in the moment.
Okay.
You are both alive. You have a diagnosis that you don't know enough about yet. There's still more tests to be done, still more information to be gained about it. Can you feel what's in the body, feel the adrenaline, feel that reaction, and say, I am safe right now? Because nobody knows where anything is heading, right?
Right.
Like we could all, we could get a cancer diagnosis and then die in a car accident on the way home from getting the diagnosis. Cancer had absolutely nothing to do with our mortality. No.
Right.
So instead of going down that road, come down to the reality that we are alive right now. This is all we know. We will take care of it. And this goes back to what I had said weeks ago about having that faith in yourself, that conviction
Mm.
that like I can handle whatever. So you know that even if the next test comes back worse than I had expected this time, we will still handle that. We can still deal with it. You know, yes, there might be preferences that every test comes back perfectly clean, but being biological beings, eventually that's very unlikely to be the case. So we need to have that internal resilience to be able to handle anything that comes up. And that happens when we are not carried away by the emotions that come through the body with every interaction that we get. Every bit of bad news that we get, we make into worse and worse and worse and absolutely, dreadful news. Take it for what it is. Feel the adrenaline in the body. Remind yourself, I am safe. We are safe. This is okay right now in this moment. There is no problem here in this moment. Now ask the doctor, what do we do next? What is the next step? And then you go from there. And then just take that next step and don't escalate.
Well, and I hear what you're saying, and I understand that that is um, uh, true and necessary because um, the already existing way of responding and um, handling situations um, needs to be undone and have something else in its place because the long-standing way of responding and handling things is frequently a source of a lot of stress and suffering. But when you consider that that happened in a week where there have been, gosh, I've lost track of it. There have been a number of different things that all had the same basic sort of effect of something would happen and there would be this adrenaline. So it's sort of like adrenaline nested in adrenaline nested in
Yeah,
adrenaline.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think I think after a while the body starts to, even before you hear something or understand what you're being told, the body is already mounting a defense.
Completely. Yeah. Yeah. We do get in that heightened state where it's just like it takes such a little trigger to go off. But again, that's why we have, meditation, yoga, breathing practices, things that are bringing the nervous system down back to some sort of a baseline. Because, like, the more amped up you are, the easier it is to just keep getting triggered by very, very small things.
Yeah.
So, doing, any practice that you can to relax, to care for the body, to bring it back down to some sort of grounding and stabilization. And then see in every given moment, as soon as you feel that bit of nervousness, you feel the being on edge, you feel the anxiety or the adrenaline, breathe, feel the spaciousness around it, feel the sensations, recognize I am safe. This is not related to the current situation. Thank you for being there, but this is not needed. It's okay. What is actually relevant in this situation now, and just keep bringing it back to the present in a way that you are fully here and grounded. Because as long as the mind is involved and it's creating stories and scenarios and what ifs, it just keeps perpetuating the cycle of nervousness and adrenaline and stress and anxiety and all of that.
What you just said about thought, um, that reminds me or connects to something that I've been thinking about um, that obviously plays a very core role in the kinds of things that we're talking about, this kind of experience and how the body reacts to it and so forth. It all builds on that stuff that we've been talking about for weeks and weeks about the whole business of compulsion, obsession, and the thoughts, the whole, I guess, just shorthanded, the whole coffee and donuts nonsense.
Mm.
And the the idea that you explained that these are just thoughts, they're very insubstantial, they don't have any reality, um, and they're not actually indicating or dictating or requiring that we do anything or take any action. And that idea has started to expand, because at first it was just about that one thing. It was very much about that one thing, just very laser focused on that. But then it started to expand to include just about anything, anything where there was a thought involved,
Yeah.
and I'm sure it seems obvious to a lot of people. For me, at first, it was just about that one thing because that was so, um, I just found the whole situation very frustrating and a little bit demoralizing.
Mm.
But, so at first, that's all I saw. Then I started to notice it with other things like, well, that's just a thought. This doesn't necessarily need to follow, don't need to take any action just because a thought showed up.
Yeah.
Having said that, easier said than done because, when you've got several decades of conditioning of thoughts are substantial. If a thought happens, it must be true. And of course, all of this is unconscious. Um,
Yeah.
and so now it's, the question that has come up many times is how do we change how we perceive and understand thought to put it in its proper perspective?
Mhm. Such a good question. Um, I really think it's mostly a matter of practice, of recognizing it, like you said, moment to moment. In is this actually relevant? Is it true? Is there any reason to believe that it has any sort of relevance to what's going on? Or is this like that's why I said before about noticing how much your habitual patterning and your conditioning is playing into this moment. Because if you start to see the pattern of thoughts, that they're not just, you know, it's very unlikely that you will one day have a uh, political figure that you are very fond of, and then the next day completely despise them, or vice versa, right? Or if you have a favorite band or sports team or something that it's like, super devoted, and then all of a sudden just, can't stand them, just absolutely atrocious. There is a pattern here that you can see where there's a consistency to the thoughts that come. And those are, less relevant. It's more of the things where it's like when it comes to safety or authority, or, you start to notice this in these kind of bigger patterns of your life where you start to recognize, oh, this is just that again in a new disguise. This is being colored. This thought is not just out of the blue. It's not really random. It's here because of all of the conditioning that has come before. So whether it's like having that craving for a donut, and you can understand why, yes, it's a deflection from all of these other things, but also you're not having a craving for a Twinkie, like I said before. You're not having a craving. There's a reason why a donut is the thing that's being popped up for whatever reason. There's a reason why this struggle against authority is popping up. It's not the first time you've ever had it. There's a
Right.
consistency here. So you start to recognize, oh, here's this pattern again. Okay, there's that again. It's like having different channels on the TV and you're flipping through and it's like, oh, there's that channel again. There's that channel. Like you recognize it when you see it. Like, there are some that you don't even have to like watch the content. As soon as you flip past it, you can tell what channel it is that you're watching because, it has such
Yeah.
consistent stuff on it. It's like that. It's like, oh, there's the unsafety channel again. There's the there's the trouble with authority channel again. There's the not wanting to feel my emotions channel. There's the, you know, donuts are really great distractions channel. Like whatever it is, you just start to recognize it. These are the foundational things that are happening, and I don't need to take it seriously. It's not real. It's another channel that's just coming online in this moment. So like, with Susanna, with her medical diagnoses, you get that. And of course, it brings up all of her past medical diagnoses.
Uh,
The reaction, right? All of the things that have happened in the past, it brings back as though they're going to happen again in the future. And then we go to the worst, right? So like all of the concerns that you have ever had about her health in the past, I am sure that you have had every health instance that she's had, I'm sure that you have calamitized in your mind to where it was going to be much worse than it actually panned out to be, right?
Probably. It's hard to recall. I mean, I do know that frequently when these things come up, one of the first things that shows up within a few minutes of the whole thing starting is um, the fear of having to continue on without her.
Yeah, exactly. So the ultimate calamity of any health thing is that the person is going to die from it. If you have gone there in the past mentally, you're going there again in the future mentally. And you have felt in the past, they're not just idle wanderings of mind. When you're concerned that your partner is going to die, it's not just a purely mental image that shows up. It's not just a purely, oh, I wonder what that would be like. There is an emotional component to that you feel that makes it feel really intense and unwanted. And it's like in the moment of imagining it, you're basically feeling what it's like for her not to be there. You,
Oh,
right? We go through the experience of loss every time we contemplate what it would be like to lose somebody. You're putting yourself in that situation and you're feeling it. So you have this history of having lost her how many times in the past, even though she's been there the whole time. You go through what it's like to feel it. And so now every time that you have a new um, diagnosis, you're thinking about this again, but you're also feeling the weight of every memory of having lost her, of how that felt in the body to imagine losing her in the past over and over and over again.
really?
Really.
I
And
would
you
have never, I would have never guessed that.
and you're going to do it again every time, when you get the diagnosis about her heart. I'm sure eventually at some point it probably escalated itself up to, oh, what if this
Oh
is
yeah. I mean, it only took just a few minutes. It didn't
exactly,
take long to get to that. But
exactly.
how does it happen that when we're experiencing this sort of thing in response to whatever is current, that all of the times that's been felt in the past is also um, present in that moment? I mean,
Well,
how does that?
not literally present, but it's like the weight of that. It's like if you've been, well, for instance, taking it back months and months and months ago, we talked about emptying the dishwasher.
Oh yeah,
That every time you empty the dishwasher, it's not the first and only time that you've ever emptied a dishwasher.
right.
It's frustrating because you are remembering all of the times that you have emptied the dishwasher in the past and creating
I
a
see.
story about the how unfair it is that you're the only one who empties the dishwasher and all of that. But when you do that, you're not literally remembering every time that you have emptied the dishwasher. I'm sure there were hundreds
I
or
see.
thousands of times, but there's this collective conception of what it was like to empty the dishwasher. You now have this collective conception of what it has been like to have to deal with the stress and strain of health issues with her. And part of that collective conception is what it feels like to lose her over and over again and to deal with the stress and the 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 concern of losing her, as well as, any other medical stuff that has happened during the period and, all of the difficulties of dealing with somebody and their health issues and taking care of them and all of that stuff. It kind of we generalize, we like do like a little it's like a little zip file of all of this stuff. So it's just easily accessible in one little concept where we don't have to like reimagine all of these things from to be there, but we kind of feel the collective weight of it because it's all being re-triggered when we bring up the situation. It's like PTSD happens not because, you're somebody who was in war, they hear a firecracker and it's not like they are literally going through the experience of being in war again, but it triggers all of that same conditioning. They have,
Right.
and so they have the same sort of stress response as if they were. If every time you have been in a situation where she's had a diagnosis about something and you've gone to the catastrophizing of this is going to be the end of her and how am I going to live without her, what it's going to be like, you have created this kind of PTSD pattern of, oh no, it's happening again. And then you're going to that again. And you're feeling all of this emotion every time that that happens.
Okay,
So,
that makes
so,
sense.
so grounding us back to what is actually here, we remember this is just a firecracker. I'm not really in a war zone. This is just a diagnosis that does not tell us anything conclusive. All right. She has had many diagnoses in the past and
Hmm.
survived. We do not know what any diagnosis is actually going to bring in the future. We don't know what's going to happen outside of that diagnosis that either, you know, prevents the thing or kills us before that diagnosis ever has a chance to. Right? We do not know anything. And so coming back to that state of not knowing is incredibly powerful in allowing us to just be with what is. Because if you assume that that diagnosis means something, you are assuming that you know the potential outcomes of it and that that is going to change the course of events for both of your lives.
Say that again.
Yeah. If we get a diagnosis for something and we
Hmm.
feel the stress of that diagnosis, like it is going to change the course of our lives, that
Hmm.
means that you believe that that diagnosis is the thing which is going to uh, have the power to direct your lives like that. Like it is the thing that is going to make the change. But there are an unfathomable number of unknowns out there which are also at play.
Yeah.
Again, the bus that is heading your way at exactly the right time that you're going to step into the street in front of it. Like there are so many other things. The virus which has just been released in, India that has not yet made its way out of the little town, which is going to get here and infect us all and kill us all before that diagnosis ever has a chance to inhabit it, right? Like we just don't know any of the other things that are going on in the world that could have some sort of impact that isn't that thing, right? But so we have to consider we're not acting out of direct uh interaction with the world as it is in that moment. We have a concept that that diagnosis means something important and that that diagnosis is going to be the thing that changes our lives. Only because you are unaware of the trillions and quadrillions of other factors in the world, which are probably going to also impact your lives, possibly in ways that make that diagnosis completely irrelevant.
So what you're describing then is a peculiar sort of myopia of to with regard to the fact that that one thing isn't going to change your life. Everything is going to change your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. It's the unknowingness of recognizing that I do not know what is going to do it. It's there also is it's helpful to come to terms with the fact that we are all going to die from something somehow.
Hmm.
Ultimately, we will all most likely get sick and or be injured and or just die in some way. So that being acknowledged, because that just seems to be a biological fact, who knows? Maybe something, really, really unforeseen will happen and we'll be the first generation ever that somehow never dies. Not exactly sure how that's going to come to pass, but barring that very, very remote possibility,
And
when we,
assuming you can stop the sun from going supernova.
exactly, exactly. Some very miraculous, interaction happens and we somehow completely evade all of the causes and conditions that have come before. When we come to terms with the fact that that is most likely going to be the way that everything pans out, then we can start to interact with life from that place of unknowing where we just don't know what is going to be positive or negative in the future. This isn't
Hmm.
just about, well, I don't have to take every diagnosis as a death sentence. It's also every time you win the lottery or get a new job or, something that's like seems really, really positive in the face of it. We have no idea how that's going to play out either. That could be the thing that kills you. That could be the thing that runs you into bankruptcy or, utterly destroys your life in some way. We have no idea. And so it's really approaching everything with that maybe kind of an approach.
Back
Uh,
to that Zen parable, right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Um, that's really the sort of foundation of how we interact with things in this life, where it's not through a concept of assumptions. We are always interacting with assumptions otherwise.
Hmm.
I assume that diagnosis is going to be serious and kill me. I assume that winning the lottery is going to really benefit my life in so many ways. I assume that a certain political candidate taking power is going to be the end of civilization. Or I assume that, somebody else is going to save us. Like all of that is an assumption that is extrapolated off of all of our conditioning and all of our previous assumptions and conceptualizations. But it's not real in this moment.
Huh. It seems to point to um, a question about how do we move away from reacting to circumstances on the basis of assumption
Mm,
and instead respond on the basis of uncertainty and not knowing.
mm. Again, super good question. We are always going to be interacting through some level of our assumptions because,
Hmm.
I think what the most important thing is to interact with the bare bones of the facts that we currently have. Also acknowledging the fact that those facts aren't really fully facts, that they're also,
Hmm.
skewed and partial in some way. But you take like in the case of the diagnosis, you know what the facts are, right? Whatever they give you at the doctor has given you a certain facts. These are the next steps. This is where we go from here. If this turns out to be the case, then we'll go here. If that turns out to be the case, we'll go there. Okay. So you come back to what is here. We are living, we are breathing, we are scheduling another test. End of story. Is there anything lifestyle or health wise that we can do to help out? Yes, no. If so, if yes, you institute those changes. If no, then we continue our daily life until the next exam, right? It's the adding on that becomes the problem. When we're assuming that like I'm still blanking on like a really good example for it, but um like we say we need a new job and we get offered a job and I, I have to look at on paper it looks like it's going to be the perfect job. It seems to tick all the boxes of all the things that I want and fits my everything. uh Holding with that I don't know kind of a mind, we can go into it with limited expectations, right? Like being aware that right now, this seems to be the best possible option. Based on everything that I'm seeing, this seems to be the best possible option. But that the fact that this seems like the best possible option, you can still be aware of, it's still a matter of our conditioning that we feel like that is the one that is drawing us, the one that seems like the most useful or well suited to our qualifications, that seems the most interesting to us. That is still filtered. There's no like objective reality to the fact that that job is definitely the one for us or is definitely going to be the best job or any of that. we come to everything through a filter, but it's just acknowledging how much is sort of completely irrelevant to the situation and how much is actually just an what's the word I'm looking for? An impossible to get rid of bit of just human biology. Do you know what I mean? Was that, I don't know if that was clear.
Everything but the bit of human biology. That one I didn't. It
Yeah,
didn't quite.
that it's part of the way that we are structured with a brain the way that it is and all of that, that we use past experiences to predict future outcomes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you mean.
And that past
Yeah.
experiences dictate our current, what we currently see as being a good or a bad thing, or preferable or non-preferable, is entirely based off of past experiences and our assumption of this chocolate cake is going to taste delicious, but I'm probably going to feel like crap tomorrow after I eat it. So, it's like remembering you're never interacting with this chocolate cake for the first time. It's all the memories of chocolate cake and how it tastes, but then also the ramifications of it and all the guilt that's, tied in with it, or, but I'm treating myself. And all of those things are based off of past memories of how we have felt and how we, the conditioning that we have around it. So
Oh.
it's a chocolate cake is never just a chocolate cake, and it's never the first one that we've ever experienced unless it was literally the first one that we've ever experienced. It's like beyond the first time that we interact with something, it will never be completely free of conditioning and bias.
So then to refer to that famous quote, he was mistaken, and in fact, a cigar is never just a cigar.
Where was that quote from?
I could be wrong. I would have sworn it was Sigmund Freud.
Mm, that's right. That sounds right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like we don't it is this is where we talk about in the seventh fetter a lot with the making something out of nothing. Because when you just look around your room for a moment, it is so hard to see things without some sort of conditioned history, assumption, judgment. We feel like we know it, we know about it, we know what it's for, we know whether I like it or not, we know its history, we know our relationship to it, all of those things, even if they're not explicitly stated every time we see the object, it's like they're there at the ready.
Yeah,
So there is like nothing that you interact with in a day that doesn't come with some split second association with it,
right.
right? Like if I just say like a random band name, Cream, you are going to have some association with it, right?
Yeah,
Something pops to mind, and there's either a favorable or unfavorable. You're going to have all these facts, all this stuff that just appears there. You are never fully like, if you put on a Hendrix album now, you're never going to hear that for the first time. You're never going to
right.
be able to interact with it fresh with absolutely no biases or history.
Yeah. Hmm.
And we are like that with everything. We walk into a doctor's office, and just the fact that we have walked in there bears with it the history of every time we have walked into a doctor's office and all of the worry and the past, positive and negative diagnoses that we've had and all of the that stuff is based like it just weights down our experience with everything we do. And there's large amount of that that is just not necessarily undoable, but we can recognize when it's happening. Where we're in delusion is when we believe that that is true all the time. That I walk into a doctor's office and I feel stressed. That must mean I'm going to get bad news. I know it's bad, right? This is a sign. This is, I need to stay away from doctor's offices because they terrify me, right? That's when we build it into delusion and we start to get these like anxieties of doctor's offices as though they themselves are the harbingers of death. We build these associations in that like, doctors equal danger. because they give me bad news about myself I don't want to hear. And so instead, it's recognizing, okay, I'm safe. I'm sitting in an office surrounded by other people who are also sitting in an office. I'm going to get some blood taken out of my arm. It's fine. It's done in a safe, controlled, sanitized way. There's no danger here. They're going to give me some information back and it's okay. And then it's just like step by step, what are you really putting onto it that isn't here in this moment?
I hear that, you know, no
Yeah.
argument. I mean, I see I
Yeah.
see the truth and wisdom of what you're saying. The question that came to mind was, how do you deal with it then when you have something that, and I think now that I'm saying this out loud, I think I know what you might say, but
I'm
I'm going
sure
to
you do.
let you say it. Uh, when you have something that's a genuine issue, like for instance, you're talking
Yeah.
about the doctor's office as a danger. Well, it's kind of funny because the cardiologist that Susanna has been dealing with since she had that procedure last year, one, when they did the procedure, the doctor who performed it, who's part of that office,
Yeah.
almost killed her. I mean, she
Jeez.
came close.
Yeah.
And the PA in that office prescribed the medication without doing the required test first, which could have killed her.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
so now that's it's hard to interpret that doctor's office any other way. You talk about danger.
Yeah. Well, that is a case where we do learn and then we stay away from those doctors. It's not.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
right,
We're not going into like, well, okay, so I went in for knee surgery and he amputated my left arm. I think I'm just gonna go back again and give him a second shot. It's not that. It's like, we still learn from these things in that regard. It's the problem of the unconscious conditioning that's happening in ways where we are associating beyond that kind of like, okay, they are clearly not good at what they do. I'm not going to go back to them and let them screw up again.
so that's
That's
the
totally
imagined stuff.
reasonable versus the imagined stuff.
Okay,
Exactly.
all
Yep.
right.
Because the imagined stuff is what drives most of our behavior and most of our suffering.
Yeah, you're right. Okay,
But just bringing your car to a mechanic, having them totally screw it up, you don't go back to that mechanic. Like you
right.
don't have to just keep, returning to let them just mess up over and over again and like learn on your car or whatever. Like it's fine to, take that into account. It's the unnecessary assumptions that we make about it. Um, and there are times where it's like, there are things to be wary about when we're going to doctors and mechanics and people who, read reviews. Like,
Yeah,
it's not to undercut any of that reasonable relative level of precaution that comes with just living in a society where humans have aptitudes, right? Some people are really good at what they do, and some people really suck at it. And it doesn't mean that you have to go to the people that really suck at their job.
right. So it's the unfounded stuff that is the issue.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. All right. And saying it out loud now, it seems really obvious. I don't know how I missed that, but okay.
This is why we do what we do. But I think the hard part is that in the kind of spiritual awakening space, we do tend to jump past the like logic of the relative level a lot because we kind of make it seem like it all has to be just everything is just lotuses and flowers and rainbows and it's all fine. Like I don't have to worry about any of it or deal with any of it. When I just see it in the right way, everything lines up and all the bricks fall down and form a road in front of me and it's just all absolutely perfect. And it clearly it's not that. That doesn't happen. So there is the relative level of being a human in a civilization that actually needs to still function. It's just all of the other assumptions that we live out of that are the, like you said, unfounded ones, the ones which are imaginary, the ones which create this idea of me living in a world a certain way and all of my assumptions of what that world is like, how it functions, what my place in it is, and how I am. All of those are the things that need to be questioned on a fundamental level. And then we still do a Yelp review and figure out which doctor, or web, whatever the rate my doctor thing, like find out this guy's stats before you go to them so that you're not, going to somebody who has had 10 uh, malpractice suits against them or something.
Right. Huh. So going back a little ways, and I can't remember what it was that you said that raised this point, but somewhere in all of this, in terms of or with regard to um, making these assumptions and these interpretations and getting carried away on the basis of things that don't have a basis,
Hmm.
um, as opposed to um, um, understanding that we can't see all ends. We don't know where things are going to go, how they're going to turn out. That's just a matter of practice.
Yeah.
So in those situations, it's just simply a matter of reminding ourselves, whoa, hold on a minute. I'm jumping to conclusions. I'm interpreting this in a way that there's no rational basis for. Reality is I don't know what's going to happen with this. So I'm going to reserve judgment and reserve the worrying and the fretting and just go ahead and take things from what's happening right now.
Effectively, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I think at least the way it starts out is that we are actively reminding ourselves in any given moment that I do not know. We can
Mm-hmm.
look at it like is exactly as you laid it out. Is this relevant? Is this true? Do I know anything beyond what I have around me right now sitting here? And the more you do that, one, I think it actually changes the pattern of thinking. It's that whole the regions of the brain that fire together, wire together. We strengthen those new pathways by doing the same thing over and over again. So instead of
Right.
every time you go to a doctor's office, you go down that anxiety spiral of, oh no, oh no, oh no. Now we start to, as soon as you start to see it, that becomes the trigger to like become mindful and be like, okay, I'm here. I'm feeling my butt on the seat. I'm feeling my breath. I'm recognizing what is actually here and what is just thought back to the moment. So that changes the actual activity there. But beyond that, also change of conditioning that we're doing every time we are convincing ourselves that actually I'm safe right now. This is here. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know how this is going to end. Hopefully, in doing these investigations and in noticing this over and over again, there is like a profound kind of insight, wisdom shift, something that might be a little bit more tangible that does kind of uproot some of this stuff or change. I think I would say what it does is it changes the inherent believability that these thoughts have when they first appear. Because it probably starts out that you'll be in a situation, a thought will show up, and it feels immediately believable, right? You get carried away by it for a moment. And then that kind of second layer of rational thought comes in and it's like, hold on, hold on, hold on. Let's breathe. Is this real? Is this true? It's like that, like Shinzen Young calls, I think, the good robot or something comes on and it's like, okay, that one takes over for a bit now and it kind of calms down the system. And so that one gets more practice and becomes more automatic. But there is like an insight or a bit of wisdom that changes the fact that those could even be believable when they first show up. We're
Hmm.
basically undercutting the whole belief system of a thought itself. That again, the body might first react. You get into a doctor's office and you feel that flush come on that because like I'm in a what I perceive as a dangerous place. But as soon as the thoughts start to kick in, they get sort of like immediately apprehended as being, oh, no, 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 it's just that. it's just that old thought again. It's just like it loses its inherent believability much,
Okay.
much, much more automatically and soon without needing to do that second layer of, okay, is this true? You know, it's that second layer of like reconditioning and questioning it. They just start to become seen as like, of course, this is just clear as day that this thought is not happening now. That any thought that I create about a future, about what this diagnosis is going to mean, that none of that has any inherent reality in this moment. And that
So,
becomes inherently clear.
so what you're saying is through repetition of bringing to mind that second layer, that eventually the second layer becomes unnecessary because it cultivates over time an understanding that shows up automatically after a period of time that, oh, this isn't true, this is just a thought, it doesn't have any substance or reality.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And you can be maybe a little bit more active too. So there's like, you can ask yourself, like in the given situation, when you get the diagnosis and you start spiraling, like, can I know from where I'm sitting right now, can I know what the outcome of this diagnosis is going to be?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and really prove it to yourself in that moment that there is nothing to grasp onto. There is no future which you can just say, yes, this is how it's going to be.
Huh. Hang on a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so um and I guess that's going to be the idea to apply in any situation because it's hard to think of anything of that fits this sort of description that isn't some sort of thought about the future.
Yeah. Tuesdays going to school, right? Immediately you launch down the path of the state stepping in and all of that. But from right now, where you sit, can you tell how this is going to play out? Do you know the inevitable outcome of this entire situation?
Right, we don't. But the one thing that it doesn't seem to address is that sense of helplessness and powerlessness.
Yeah. Well, I can see how actually in this regard, that unknowing could actually be reinforcing for you that sense of, oh no, I
Oh,
don't know what to do. I need to
yeah, you're right.
some way to, yeah. So it's sort of a separate issue slightly.
Well, going that way for just a moment,
Yep.
going back to what I said to you in that email message I sent you a few days ago, um, it didn't dawn on me until much later after the whole situation had kind of calmed down and had kind of gone semi-dormant for a while that that would have probably been a really great opportunity to do reparenting.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
That's probably the best approach for those sorts of things.
Super, super helpful. Yes.
Okay.
You can also undercut it with if there's the idea that I have to do something in this situation, right? Like I'm feeling helpless because the state is going to come in and do something.
Mm-hmm.
That understanding that you don't know the outcome, that can undermine that idea that you are helpless. Because if you were genuinely helpless, right? You are chained up in a basement and you literally cannot leave. You're locked, you can't do it. But you know the idea that I am in danger and I need to do something in order to break the chains, to undo the lock, to escape this basement and to get out. There's like a clear line of if I'm going to get to safety, this is what needs to change to get there. The problem is in the situation like with Tuesday, you don't know where the danger actually lies. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. You don't know the steps to a resolution. So the helplessness there is because of the unknowing.
Right.
right? You don't know the right thing to do, as though there was one right thing that you could do to actually fix the situation.
Well, and actually, for sake of really being clear about it,
Yeah.
um, the helplessness and powerlessness rose out of the fact that when she refused to go, there was nothing we could do. It's like Susanna said to me last night. She said, "What, were we supposed to just throw her in the car and go drag her to school?" I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
obviously not."
No.
You know.
No.
So I mean, it begins with her, the fact that her actions are setting up this whole thing, and it seems like there's nothing we can do to get her to do what we need her to do.
And this is the thing that it's the feeling of I need her to do a certain thing for me to be okay. She's not
Mm,
doing that thing, so I can't be okay until she does that thing. I can't force her to do that thing, so I'm helpless.
right.
But again, it does come back to like, what are the ramifications if you don't? So there's a concern about those.
Hmm.
There's a concern that you don't know how to get this other independently willed person to concede and basically do what you want this other independently willed person to do.
Right.
The irony being that, again, this is that same authority dynamic that she has this authoritarian that's telling her, you need to go to school. And she's feeling the same oppression that you would feel if you were being told by, say, a state that, she has to go to school, or that you felt as a child when you were told that you had to do something that you did not want to do or see any value in doing.
Well, let's go ahead and dump a ton of irony on this because
Uh-huh.
I was in almost the. I mean, it was the same situation. Not going to school. My reasons were different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went through the same thing, and for me, it wound up. It's a long, convoluted story. For sake of brevity, my mom pulled some shenanigans that wound up getting me put in juvenile hall for 6 weeks.
Mm.
So
And did that seem to be a good thing for you or a bad thing?
it wasn't good.
And so, as a kid who was in that situation, what would you have wanted her to do?
Um, I
What?
just wanted them to try to get something resolved with either the school, the police, or the parents of the kids involved who are making my life a living hell.
Mm.
And we are trying to do that with her, but she just refuses. Like we're trying to. We've initiated having a conversation with the principal of the school and her caseworker for her accommodations for her autism. And I mean, she said she'll talk with him, she'll listen, but she said she's not going back. She's kind of dug her heels in. So, but we're trying. I mean, we really
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
I
But
certainly would never want to fail her or abandon her the way my parents did with me.
yeah. But there's a limited power that, any of us have.
Yeah,
What are the other options that are there?
she doesn't want any other options. All she wants is to do school from home. But
Oh.
well, the problem there is that we've dealt with having to do school from home for various reasons, work that she didn't do at school because she barely does her work at school. This has
Mm.
been the case for several years. Try to get her to do it at home. She very rarely can you get her to do work at home. Um, and uh, we all actually we were having to do some schooling from home during the whole COVID thing,
Mhm.
and she refused to do it then. So we've talked about it. We're like, well, we can't do school from home. She won't do the work, and Susanna already has a full-time job. She
Right.
doesn't need to be trying to get her to do her schoolwork. And I mean, I can do it, but she seems to resent the hell out of it.
Mm.
You know, um,
If it's, yeah, and obviously I've never met her. I don't know, the all the specifics of the situation, but
right.
I know like in talking to Pernilla about it, how there is that, like I had mentioned, that sort of defiance disorder that's often common. And
Mhm.
um, I don't know, the tact that you took with her when she was having to do schoolwork at home for like during the pandemic or something. and she's older now, so different situation. Um, but would it be something where if you were to basically just, give her the stuff that needs to be done within um, a certain period, but without telling her when she has to do it or how she has to do it, just that, basically she has the freedom to do it however she wants. It's just that this work, needs to be completed by the end of the week. How she does it is up to her, all of that. Does she respond better to that sort of a no?
No, we've tried that with a lot of other things, everything from housework to she has certain things she has to do, her laundry, what have you, clean the bathroom that she uses. Um, or we've even done it with schoolwork that has to be done. Where like over a holiday break, she's got a period of time. It's like you need to do this. Here's and laid everything out for her.
Yeah.
Made sure she knew exactly what she had to do. Made sure she had everything to do it. No, she, and I'm hoping I feel like she will eventually grow out of this. But right now, she's at a place in her life where she doesn't want to do anything. She just wants to sit on the couch. She wants to draw. She wants to scroll through things on her phone and watch stuff on YouTube on the TV. And occasionally she likes to go into the kitchen and bake. If it's not something that's on her list of things she wants to do, not happening.
It is very much part of that age too. That's I mean, you're dealing
Yeah,
with whatever sort of inbuilt resistance there is, but then also, that time period is very much where she's trying to develop her own individuality and break away from the family and
right.
the nest, and is just a quintessentially difficult time period for a kid to be kind of trying to create their own sense of self. Um,
Mm,
and it's a obviously it's a balance in the parenting of that to give them enough freedom to be able to actually do that and not feel constrained and like they have to rebel even further, but at the same time, you know, have them recognize that there are things that need to be done in terms of like, you have to go to school a certain number of days a year and you have to, pass certain tests in order to not be held back a grade.
right.
How does she feel about the prospect of like not, having to repeat a year if she doesn't pass this year?
Um, I would guess she doesn't like it, but I think it's kind of an abstraction to her because she faced that in seventh, eighth, and ninth grade because of
Okay.
her unwillingness to do work.
Mm.
And gosh, actually, no, it's sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth grade where
Um,
she didn't want to do work, and so she barely did the school work. And in all cases, she just barely passed. And the only reason she passed was because um, every year she had one teacher somewhere who'd give her a break, and that made it possible for her to pass. But all 4 years, we're telling her you're going to wind up having to repeat a grade.
yeah.
There was, obviously she didn't like it. There was a response from her saying, I don't like that. She was upset at the idea, but at the same time, I get the sense that it didn't seem real to her,
Yeah.
so it didn't motivate her. It wasn't a case of, well, I need
Yeah.
to do something to avoid that outcome, so I'll go ahead and do it. You know,
And this is the case where it's tough because, I'm sure a lot of the teachers were trying to do what they thought was the kind and compassionate thing, but
yeah,
ultimately we learn by making mistakes. We learn by having consequences. And
yeah,
there can really be a benefit to her potentially having to, fail and repeat a grade and learn that, okay, well, there's a reason. It's not just because you're an asshole that is making her do her homework, that why she has to do it. Like there are consequences that aren't imposed by you, because that's the thing is like we don't you don't want her to learn that like the consequences to not doing the work are that she's going to be punished and lose her phone or something like that because that just,
right,
it's just punitive punishment. What she needs to learn is that in the real world there are things that actually have to get done, and if they don't, things fall apart, you fail, you get sent back, and it's not a personal thing, it's just more of a larger picture issue. And so
Yeah,
it's not your fault that it happens, and it's not Susanna's fault and all of that. It's like, oh, okay, so now we learn. But, maybe it doesn't need to come to that far, but hopefully there's something which she will actually kind of, sense the impact of so that she can actually learn to make those decisions for herself going forward.
yeah, and I'm not sure what that would be in this case because, like I said, the only option she's willing to consider is going to school at home. And of course, I already told you where the difficulties are in that. And if you get held back a grade in that, it doesn't really have the kind of impact it does when you're in school and you watch
Yeah,
everyone else go on a grade, and you're now you're still in the same grade with kids that you saw, at grade below you,
yeah,
your classmates. So, I don't know. I don't think that that would really um, have any impact on her. And then, if we wind up dealing with the state, first you get a bunch of fines, which can be insanely expensive. That won't really register with her because that's an abstraction
no,
because she doesn't have to be responsible for any
yeah,
of the money or dealing with whoever you have to deal with when those things start to happen. The only thing that would become real for her is, once they get past the fines and they go, okay, well, we're going to have to take her out of the home.
yeah,
And that's not an option because once you get taken out of the home, you don't know if you're ever going to get your kid back, at least not in
no,
this state. I don't know
no,
about other states, but here it's you may never get them back.
yeah,
They may be held until I don't know, 18 or 21,
yeah,
and God knows what it would be like being uh, cared for, or I shouldn't say cared for,
no,
being
not really.
being being having the state responsible for you. I can only imagine what kind of really awful sorts of situations play out in those environments.
Yeah,
So obviously, we can't let it go that far.
no, no, no.
So
And I assume she's aware of
mhm.
all being possibilities.
Yeah, we've talked to her about it repeatedly, but she's dug her heels in. I want to go to school from home. Why can't I go to school from home? Although we talked to her about it last night. Where Susanna's trying to talk to her about, okay, school from home is not an option. You're going to have to go to some sort of school. These are your options. We're hoping that if we just keep talking to her about it and telling her that the school at home is not an option, that eventually it'll sink in and she'll acquiesce and make a decision from the handful of options she has for school outside the house.
I,
So,
I don't know like, is it possible to do like a trial 6 months of a school from home to see if
yeah,
she is able
we,
to?
Susanna raised that idea last night. My concern was that if it doesn't work, first she's going to fight us tooth and nail because she's already got it. She's at home. I've got what I want. This is
Yeah,
perfect. And then, so fighting tooth and nail. Then the other thing is that getting her set up at a school and getting her to go to it, we're already having problems with it. It's going to be that much harder if she's having to transition out of the house to the school.
yeah,
Um, so, but maybe there's something there we're overlooking in terms of a solution of some kind.
yeah.
Maybe, huh?
Wondering, I was just wondering if, because when she had the schooling at home in the past, like with COVID and stuff, there were no, I'm assuming back then it probably wasn't her first choice, but there was no like alternative. Like now, if she really wants to be homeschooled and the alternative is that if she doesn't do the assignments at home, that she has to then go back to some in-person school that she doesn't want to do. I wonder
You might be right about that.
might be her motivation to actually doing like, okay, so these are, as long as you are doing it from home, we're okay with that, but these are the assignments that have to be done. Otherwise, there is no other option than to do
So
and
you're saying that the school district would actually insist that you come back to physical brick and mortar school.
exactly. So then
Okay.
this is a, basically it's in her court now that she's getting what she wants in terms of being homeschooled. She can, but it's completely in her power to fulfill these assignments every week and that, as long as they're getting done, it's okay. She can stay homeschooled. If they're not, if she doesn't have that self-motivation to do it, then
Hmm.
there is literally no other option than to have to go back to a brick and mortar school. And hopefully that might give her both the empowerment of like, okay, she's getting what she wants, but now it puts it in her court that this is all being done under her auspices and not because you are enforcing it on her that she has to. There's no
Right.
external authority enforcing on her that she has to do it this way, but there's also that kind of nebulous threat that like if I don't, this is my chance to basically get what I want without having to go back to that place that I don't want to go to.
And it's the state and school that would insist she goes
Yeah.
back, not us. So we're
Yeah,
we're off the hook on that one.
exactly. Yeah, it's not
Okay.
coming from you guys. It is literally a state issue.
Okay.
But
Well, I'm going to look into that and see if that's
Hmm.
the case. Because if that is the case, then it seems like it would be. Because otherwise, how would they deal with that situation? Because you know
Right.
it comes up. Um,
Yeah.
then if that's the case, then that's the solution right there.
Yeah,
We
it'll
can do
be
that and
it'll
give her what she wants and not have to worry about. It's entirely on her. We can just turn on cruise control and let it go.
well, it gives it that where, it really feels for her like the ball is in her court now.
Yeah.
You're not enforcing her to do something that she doesn't want to do. She can understand, hopefully, why, she has certain assignments that has to be done because it's like I think there's also a difference. Like if she's technically going to physical school, but isn't going a lot, and so she has to do some homework at home and is kind of doing those, but it's kind of half-assed because she's not really being homeschooled. She's just kind of not wanting to go to school. Hopefully, it might actually put her in that position where now, like, okay, this is official homeschooling. Like, this is what we're doing, but this is in it's in your court. Like, this is what
Right.
how you get to direct how it's going to work, but the state says, there is a curriculum that has to be followed, by the state. There are certain tests that have to be passed and, certain assignments that have to be covered. And as long as you are willing to do that, then we can go forward with it. And then hopefully
Yeah.
that will give her the motivation to actually make it work.
And I would assume there are time frames that these things have to happen in too.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think
Well,
they try to follow the basic like state curriculum, within.
that would make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm optimistic about that because if that's the case, then I can't see why it wouldn't be because I wouldn't know how else they would manage to accomplish it.
Yeah.
Getting kids through school away from the school environment. And wow, you know, Suzanne and I can rest easy.
Yeah. I mean, it would be great if you could get that to work for her. And
And I'm
yeah,
going to look into that as soon as we're done talking today. I'm going to talk to Suzanne
amazing.
about that and start looking to see what the case is or contacting them if the information's not online.
Yeah. Because
Uh,
especially in terms of keeping them from, trying to come in and intervene in some way with her not going to school, it at least shows that you are trying to do something. You're trying to get her educated in one way or another, and you're
right.
in the middle of trying to figure out how to make it work, to where she will actually be able to do the work and learn what needs to be learned in a way that's conducive to her. Because I understand. I mean, I went to school, my whole life, but if I could have been homeschooled, I would have been very happy being homeschooled. I hated physical school.
Yeah. Well, I did too. I mean, the thing that it's funny, Tuesday says you don't understand. Like, actually, I do. I went through all of the same things you went through, but in her case, she has a tendency to exaggerate, distort, and misrepresent things. I mean,
Mm,
this has been well demonstrated many times. And so she's saying she doesn't want to go to school. She didn't know I heard her. She was talking to her boyfriend
yeah,
because people are not nice to her. They don't like her. They
mm,
treat her badly. And who knows what that really means.
yeah,
But I know that when I was in school, I had a situation with bullies in ninth grade. Walking down the halls, people would crack jokes about me and say hurtful things, and
yeah,
there are a range of difficulties I had in all through school, especially high school. So I've lived through it. I know what it's like.
yep, Yeah.
But in her case, we don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's really hard to know. I mean, she had brought this up before, and we asked her caseworker what was going on with these kids at school, and she said that she had watched her with other kids at lunch, and she said everything seemed fine. They were all talking, they were all interacting, people were laughing and smiling. She said, I didn't see any evidence of anything unpleasant going on.
Mm.
And then she talked to some of her classmates, and so all that to say is this is how she sees it, and I know it's real for her.
Yep.
All this to my point in saying this is that she's at a I forget what they're called, but it's a charter school for people who are into the arts,
Oh,
whether it's
well.
acting, music, drawing, painting. And
Yeah.
it's not an easy place to get into. We
Yeah.
actually got her in there because of someone Susanna knows, just sheer luck. And of course, it's funny. She did the audition, and then she was told by the principal, "You got in on your own merits. It wasn't because of
Yeah.
someone you
That's
knew."
amazing.
So she's because of the fact that she's perceiving the way things the way she is, she's walking away from this amazing opportunity, not only to get training as an artist, but it opens all kinds of doors for you for art schools and
Mm.
internships. And she's just walking away from all of that.
That's really a shame.
Mm-hmm.
What an opportunity.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's what we always talk about that, like you said, her experience is true for her. So it really doesn't matter what the other teachers see and what the external reality seems to be. It's only a matter of how she interprets it.
Well, I'm thinking like me at some point later in life, and there's nothing I can do about this, but I woke up to the fact that those a lot of some of those things actually happen, but there are a lot of things, especially when I was younger in grade school, where I felt like she felt, and they weren't actually happening. It was
Right.
just the way my mind was putting it together. I couldn't see that until much later in life. I'm thinking later on in life, she's going to look at that and go, wow, okay, that wish I hadn't done that. But like I said, there's nothing I can do about that. So,
No, no, we really don't know until, it's too late in some cases.
yep.
But it is how we learn, and we do have to respect however it is for her at that time. All we can do is just give the guidance that we do, and then whether it's accepted or not is entirely up to the other person.
Yeah, you're right.
Frustrating as that can feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Frustrating is one word for it.
Right?
That's probably one of the milder descriptions.
We it's tough, especially when it's coming from a place of love and experience. And it's like I've been there. I don't want you to suffer the way I did. I don't want you to make the same mistakes. And it's
She doesn't
usually
want to hear
coming from
it.
a place of love, but no, because it doesn't help. We again, we kind of need to learn from our mistakes. This That's why the whole like, helicopter or bulldozer parenting can has been really a problem for people because
Yeah.
the kids never learn how to deal with any consequences. So they never really learn like responsibility or how things, how the society works outside of having somebody just pave the way for you to do everything. And so
Right.
we do learn a lot of our integrity and a lot of our biggest life lessons by making mistakes that we might regret later. But that's just, it's only, it, it's kind of like jumping up a level of perspective, but it only really matters that that's the case if we take this kind of limited view of, I believe her life should go like this, and this is how it should look. And I think that if she got educated in this school and got the leg up that would come from, the opportunity of having this education in this prestigious school, I know how that's going to look. There's an assumption there, like we talked about earlier, that just like when we have the idea of a diagnosis, we make it real because we think we know the consequences of that diagnosis. we think that we know the benefits that are involved with getting a degree from a school like that. But we don't
Right.
actually know if her staying in that school would actually lead her to, suicidal depression or something because her perception of the school is so bad that she's never actually getting any of the benefit out of being there that somebody else might have.
You're right. I'm glad you said that. I had not made that connection at all. Hmm.
We think that you going to a prestigious school is always like a good thing regardless, but it's just not for everybody. And so it's having that same not knowing this that like maybe for her homeschool actually leads to a much better life than going to what seemed like a really remarkable opportunity school.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it means that we have to deal with some hardships because she's going through a phase in her life where she is, I don't know how else to describe it, but to just say caustic. And it's not just to her mom and to me to a lesser extent. I mean, she she feels much more free to dump all over her mom than she does me, but then her boyfriend. I mean, yesterday Susanna told her get off the phone because she was just tearing into him for no reason. I mean, they got on the phone and immediately she just
Wow.
brought out the chainsaw.
Yeah.
Susanna said, "Get off the phone." She made her take a break for a while. She got back on the phone with him, started right up again. She said, "Get off the phone." And so, if she's going to school from home, we're gonna. We used to, we used to get a little bit of time, quiet time to ourselves in the
Yeah.
afternoon during the week. So now we're gonna.
But again, you don't know why that caustic behavior is there.
You're right. You're
And
right.
that could very well also be a reaction to all the stuff that's going on in school or, in the perception of having to go back to school or, the stuff that she has encountered at school or something else. And it's like that small change in the system that we don't know why she's behaving like that, but it could very well have to do with all of this other, stuff that's the strain that she's under because I don't know. I've never met her, but I'm assuming that like, just caustic aggression is probably not like her fundamental nature.
No,
That
it's something that we saw show up. I guess it was about 4 years ago that it
Mm,
started showing up. So if that's the case, it's actually a response not just to this school, but to um, middle school and high school, the other high school one she went to last year.
mm.
So
It can really be. It's like, we talk about those defense mechanisms. Yours is cleaning, hers is being caustically aggressive. Um, but,
I'm
but it deflects from whatever other feelings she can't handle.
going to remember that because at some point in time, it might be possible to say to her, I know you're feeling badly, and that's where these reactions are coming from, and maybe try to see if I can get her to be aware of what she's feeling. Because if she can be aware of what she's feeling, then she can talk about it. And we actually finally found a psychologist for her.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
I hope they're really good.
yeah, me too. So we'll see. I'm optimistic. But today's conversation reminds me of something that I read in a book by Timothy Leary.
Really?
Three greatest words are I don't know.
Wise man. It's absolutely, absolutely true. And it really comes from, we can start out with that kind of like it can be kind of like a philosophy or like a self-help reminder. Like, I don't know, this too shall pass. We can use those things and they are effective in the moment, just kind of like a balm that we use to soothe it. But it's what I was pointing to before that when we start really looking at the thoughts and they're undermining their believability, that I don't know goes from being like a topical bomb that you put on to just completely changing the system.
Ah,
So
Yeah,
it really becomes the starting point of just openness and not knowingness, as opposed to just using it to soothe the discomfort of a given situation.
right. It reminds me of a guy who was my sponsor in AA for a while, and he was an older guy. One of those people who's lived long enough to really have some experience under his belt.
Yeah.
And he used to say to me, I mean, this was one of the things he would repeat. He used to say to me, I don't say the serenity prayer, the one, that thing they have in AA.
Yeah.
I practice it. And so
Yeah.
what he told me was he would just kind of recite it to himself and use that as his framework for dealing with whatever was going on. He had done that for so long. This guy was really amazing. I've met two or three people like this that were just, it's almost unbelievable. He was totally unflappable,
Yeah.
totally unflappable. He had this wife who was just awful to him. I mean, it's like she just lived to be mean to him.
Uh,
Didn't touch him. He lost his sight in one eye. Didn't touch him. Wound up losing sight in the other eye for a while. He eventually got it back. But he wound up losing sight in both eyes for a while and was having to depend on people he knew in AA to help him get around because
uh,
his wife wouldn't. Unflappable.
wow.
And it wasn't just an act. I
Yeah.
spent enough time around with him and got to know him over a
Yeah.
period of a few years that I saw it in action over and over and over again. And
Yeah.
it's just, it was like water off a duck's back. It just didn't touch him. He just shed life's difficulties. Just
Yeah.
didn't even get a chance to get a foothold.
That is amazing. That is wonderful.
Yeah. So, and I
Mhm.
didn't realize it, but that's what he had done. What you
Yeah.
just described.
Yeah.
So it does work.
It does. It absolutely does. And
Yeah, I don't
it
doubt
takes
it.
that, yeah, it just takes that practice and that insight into, when we talk about those paradigm shifts, it's really, I don't know how much of it is like a physical, biological shift in the brain where, again,
Mm.
certain networks just don't function the way they did, or other networks come
Or you
on.
have something that overrides the older programming.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's just that like fundamentally new way of seeing things that like it's like one that I, relate to a lot was like growing up, I ate meat like crazy, right? Like I was eating everything. And then I went vegan, and then it was like that light switch went off where all of a sudden what once looked like delicious food that was really enticing just
Hmm.
became grotesque and horrifying. And like, why does anybody eat that? And like
Right.
my perception of that thing had just shifted from like, ooh, delicious to ooh. And that doesn't, it didn't go back. It's like that that
Hmm.
just way of looking at a thing. And it's that same sort of thing of that light switch of like, just because I think it's true and I believe it to be true and I feel it, so it's true. And then that light switch goes off to where it's like, no, this is just sensation in the body. This is just an image showing up in the mind that has no relation to this moment. I don't know anything outside of this small, tiny little frame of image that's here, sounds that are here, sensations that are here. There is literally no world beyond this that I can access at this moment. Everything else is thought. I can't even
That's
tell
I
you
like the
that.
way you put that.
Thank you. I can't even tell you that the rest of a house exists right now because that has to be a thought. There has to be a memory that tells you that there's another room other than this.
There's something that it's kind of related to that, but it's not precisely the same thing that has started to begin to just show signs of coming online lately because it comes up infrequently, but it does keep coming up. Is that something will happen? Like Tuesday will say something to me and just really mean, and there's this reaction, thoughts, and all this, and just of course everything is unbidden. Like so many, like everything else, it just happens on its own. But what happens is this recognition of that's not the thought that, wow, why is she being so mean to me? That's actually just the sensation in the body. And I know you said they're not connected, and I still have a hard time with that. But I do recognize, though, that it's not all of the thoughts and beliefs about what was said. It's all starts with just that sensation in the body that shows up when something is said or done.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's just practice that the more you do it, the more you will start to see that there is no linkage there. That you, even the idea that she
Mhm.
says something to you and you feel a sensation in the body, there is an assumption of that causality.
Right.
There is an assumption that somebody can say something to you that triggers a sensation in the body. But we don't have a direct experience of that link.
How so?
Well, she literally isn't like part of your hormonal system, right? Like she's not
Oh,
physically engaged in the body,
right.
right? There is no connection that you can determine. There's an idea that if somebody says something to you, the brain interprets it in a certain way. It responds it back to this whole series of past memories when I have felt a certain way and it triggers that. That's a map that, it makes logical sense that we can follow back, and there's probably a relative amount of truth nested in there that there is this kind of pattern of biological causality that happens. But in your actual direct experience, there is somebody who says something, blah 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 blah, and then this feeling of sensation in the body.
Hmm.
And the connection there does not exist in your direct experience the way that it's believed it is. We believe that, like, she says something to me, so I feel shameful and I feel, the full weight of shame and anger and all of this stuff that comes up with it. What you feel is just a localized sensation in the body
Hmm.
and maybe some thoughts of memories or responses or other things that show up here, as mental images or a voice in the mind or something like that, and cut it off at the bare experience of just that. Don't create that link that says, this is because I'm experiencing it because of that. Just take it for what it is and see that
Okay.
this sensation that's here does not relate to her. There is a thought in the mind, there is an image that kind of shows up here, and that shows up in its own little space. It's kind of like you can feel spaciousness around it, right? There's all of this kind of openness, and there's this kind of vague image that just sort of appears somewhere in space. And you might hear a voice, and that also is floating in this kind of open spaciousness somewhere, and you feel sensation, and that's floating in this open spaciousness somewhere. And that open spaciousness is much more interesting than all of these little fleeting moments of sensation and image and sound that float through it. But we give all of the interest to those and say that they are
Right.
real because there's a concept that binds them together. And this is every time I see this sight and I feel this sensation and I hear this sound, that means I'm feeling shame. And that's her fault. That's because of her. I'm feeling anger because of her. I am pointing a finger back. If you come back to that open spaciousness where all of these things happen, you can see that they are just these individually, independently occurring phenomena that just show up and then they're gone. And she can say something, and maybe you will experience similar sensations and images and sounds, or maybe not.
Hmm.
But there's that spaciousness there that's untouched by any of that, because that is much more fundamental, and that sort of unstainable, untouchable aspect of being, that unflappable place, comes from
Hmm.
that spaciousness that is not those attention grabbing sensations and sights and sounds. And the idea that they have to be gotten rid of or that they are there as a result of somebody else is just another mental fabrication. If we're really here with the raw experience of what's here, it's just spaciousness and then constantly fleeting sensations and sights and sounds, and things are just popping in and out of existence in this field. The fact that those sensations appear when somebody, like two people are in a room, one person says something to one person, they experience a very unique constellation of sensations, sights, and sounds. The person turns, says the same thing to the other person, they will experience a very different constellation of sensations, sights, and sounds. It does not have anything to do with the words that the first person is saying. It has to do with everything about the entire biological system of causes and conditions that are in each of these fleeting bodies.
Right.
It does not relate to that. This is just a little electrical stimuli that shocks the system, and then the system is going to respond in whichever way it does. But that's entirely based off of its causes and conditions that have really nothing to do with that person who's standing there just saying the kind of innocuous phrase.
And I managed to grasp that. Where it gets a little bit tricky for me is I can see that somebody says something and one person has no reaction to that at all
Mhm.
because of the way that they've been put together by genetics and circumstances and what have you. But then you say that same thing to another person and they have this really strong reaction. So it's possible to see and understand that what that person's saying isn't the direct cause of that reaction, but it's still hard to disconnect the fact that in the second person, they say something and there's something that seems to result from what they've said. And I've never been able to completely unbind those things.
Well, we are constantly okay. We'll kind of bump it up a layer too. Um, there is no separation, right? So, person, this person who's speaking and this person who's receiving and having these experiences
Mhm.
are not unique individuals who are completely separate from each other, right? The entire
Right,
environment of biological cells here breathing, biological cells here breathing, all of this is interrelated. Whatever
right,
words and stuff, it is, there is a connection because it is one system, which is
right,
kind of feeding back on each other. So, on one level of speaking, of course, there is no separation between any of it. There is a complete connection between all of the actors and all of the inanimate objects and everything in the environment is kind of part of this one flow of experience. So, from that sort of higher eighth federy kind of place, it is true that there is an inbuilt connection to all of this. But from the level that we're talking, when we're talking about like second fetter and first fetter and fifth fetter and fourth fetter, that kind of range, it's really like the bottom fives. It's about the idea that somebody could say something to me and that is making me feel a certain way.
ooh, when you say it like that, okay,
All
that
right.
making me feel okay. All
Yeah.
right, I understand that because
Good.
they can't make you feel. They don't have
Ex-
that level of power or control.
Exactly.
You know,
That
because
is
if something had,
completely.
huh?
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say if something had been different in the history of that person, those words might not have any effect at all.
Exactly. So that's why, and that level of talking, and that kind of lower five level of talking, there is no connection. That, as Pernilla says, Janice can say whatever Janice says. Janice can be Janice, and it's completely based on this system as to whether I'm going to hear that as a criticism for me and take it as, oh, they're really talking about me and it hurts so bad and I know I'm a terrible person and go into that whole story of it, or like that guy you talked about, just completely unflappable, like
Mhm.
that's her shit. Like it's not talking about me. She doesn't even see me. She's
Right.
only seeing her perception of what she thinks I am, and she's projecting all of her insecurities and everything else onto me. So when she talks about me, she's just talking about herself. And if you have that kind of perspective, you can recognize that nobody makes you feel anything.
Right.
So in that level, there is
Huh.
no connection there with that kind of reactivity. Like I said, where I think you're also pointing a bit is that, in the higher level, it is all one big washy system where everything is interacting. So, but there's no,
Right.
but in that too, there's no individuality. So, there's no
Uh,
Tuesday who is making Darrell feel a certain way when she says something. It is just an impersonal interaction flowing of a system that there is caustic, and that's even
that's even a judgment.
the judgment, exactly. So there are words coming out which this part of it hears as caustic, and then moves in such a way that it then responds, and there's like this kind of back and forth. But if there was no judgment involved with that, then there is a much more just sort of open back and forth. And if we have cleared up the whole first five fetter range of stuff, that interaction becomes very, very different because then the words are no longer seen as caustic necessarily. Then all of that movement becomes very different towards what else is happening, what's coming from that other side.
And you had referred to this earlier, and I cannot remember the words you used to describe it, but you're talking, you had, and you're kind of talking about it again now. The fact that there's one level where things are very sort of conventional, and another level where it's something else. It sounds to me like what you're talking about is what the Buddhists refer to as the mundane and the super mundane.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
or
right.
the relative and the ultimate, or
Okay, I'm not
yeah,
as familiar with that second one, but the
yeah,
first one I've heard a lot, so
yeah,
that registers.
yeah.
Huh. Okay,
That's why we're trying to talk more about practical non-duality.
right,
It's like the integration of the wisdom and the insights that you get from the like ultimate or super mundane level of understanding about the way things function, but also not just using that to completely bypass and deny all of the humanity that is also here at the same time.
yeah,
It's like we have learned scientifically that, you know, this body is not really a body, it's a bunch of atoms, and that those atoms even aren't atoms. Those atoms are just quantum particles in a state of, you know, quantum flux, that things are randomly popping in and out of existence with no
right,
predictability. And yet it seems like there's predictability on this level. It seems
yeah.
like there's a relative amount of stability here. I don't just randomly pop in and out of existence, and a horse doesn't just spontaneously appear in the room and disappear. And like the it seems to our eyes on this level that there is some kind of general consistency. We have buildings in Europe that have been there for, hundreds, thousands of years. Like, right? Like
Right.
there seems to be something that we call stability on that, even though we know that what it's made of is constantly randomly appearing and disappearing. So we can kind of entertain both of those levels at the same time.
Well, and they're useful too. I mean, if it's handled with skill, you can go from the practical level of doing something that works on that level and gets a good result, and then go to that more rarefied level and find it possible to let go of something that is harder to let go of when you're thinking of it in the more practical sense.
Exactly. Absolutely exactly right. And that's really about the integration. That's what it's about. It's infusing our normal everyday relationships and activities with the wisdom that we glean from these, higher experiences or more open, you know, yeah, higher feder experiences, which don't mean that we then just have to go off and live in a cave and
Right.
completely distance ourselves from everything and everybody. It's really finding that balance of where we can live in both at the same time.
Well, and that brings me to something that this kind of comes up with some regularity, that um, being a parent,
Mhm.
at least for us, um, has, and I'll even speak for myself, even though I know Susanna would agree, that it's the hardest thing I've ever done, hands down. And I've done a number of things that at the time, I wonder how I managed to get through that. But being a parent um, supersedes them all.
Yeah, I can
But I
imagine.
also recognize that the situation, if it wasn't for being a parent and having her in our life, that there would be less of the drive and motivation. I mean, it would still be there, but there probably would be less of the drive and motivation to really make use of this stuff in
Yeah.
order to put an end to the unnecessary stress and suffering that results. So you know, there's she's brought a lot of benefit to my life.
Yeah.
You know,
There's a reason why the Buddhists always said that, the adversities in our life and the most difficult people are our best spiritual friends.
yeah.
It, we really we grow again by challenges and adversity. And it's wonderful to be able to do it all from a place where it doesn't feel like it's an imposition or it's, life beating us down, but rather we can use it as an opportunity for growth and learning and insight and really work with it. And it changes our interactions with life in general when we have that perspective that like every moment is an opportunity to benefit from understanding something about ourselves as opposed to, oh, damn it, the world is at it again, and this is just gonna beat me down. Or just let's be present for what's here and see what we can actually glean from this experience.
Well, it took a very long time for that to sink in, but earlier on, I would send you an email, and this is going on, and a response with, um, you're not trying to get rid of these, you're not trying to get rid of this unpleasantness, and now it's gotten to a point where just automatically, when something happens, it's a matter of going to what's being felt so that it can be investigated. That's how it became obvious the other day that the inability to accept powerlessness and helplessness was a matter of getting into that feeling and really staying with it. Because, especially when you're upset, your mind is jumping all over the place and trying to focus on, everything else. There's just no, just right here, right here, right here. And finally, really kind of locked in with that feeling. And then shortly after locking in with it, really being able to stay and kind of get inside that sensation, like, oh, wow, okay, you feel helpless and powerless, and you can't stand that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing. I love that. I love that. I love that. It's such a powerful way of turning it around because now all of a sudden you're not stuck in that situation as the helpless, powerless one. There's now this shift of perspective. There's a recognition of feelings of helplessness and powerlessness, but all of a sudden those aren't real in the way that they used to be.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Huh. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah. You're you're you're
Interesting.
you're no longer the helpless, powerless one when you recognize that there are beliefs and feelings of being powerless and helplessness.
Yeah, it automatically puts a distance there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because if you hadn't pointed it out, I think that would have completely escaped me. I don't know that I would have ever come across that.
Yeah.
So, of
Yeah. Yeah.
course, be careful there, because then it becomes, there's still part of the mind that will want to try to find an escape hatch, and like, well, I can do that.
Completely.
That's not what
Completely.
we're. That's not what that's about.
It's not, but it's so helpful to have that like the recognition that even in that instant, it's teaching you that there is no such thing as helplessness or um yeah, the other word in that
Powerlessness.
powerlessness. Thank you. In that
Yeah.
moment. It's just a perspective.
Wow. Hey, you're right. Wow. Okay. There's so much great stuff available for helping a person unbind themselves. But the trick is remembering it. Of course, I
Mhm.
can refer back to these videos, which I do. But the trick is remembering it, even if you're watching the videos regularly.
Yeah,
You have to write it down or do something to get it in memory and then recall it, which it can be done. It's just a process that takes time,
it does. It
sometimes
totally
many
does.
months.
It does. It
So,
absolutely does. But yeah, so notice I guess a fundamental thing that we're always looking for is my conceptual assumption of this moment actually what's really here? So I think there may be a easier way of putting that is just because I feel it to be true, is it? So when you feel I'm feeling this feeling of helplessness or powerlessness, is it true? Is that really the experience that you're having right now? Is Are you really helpless or powerless in this situation? Is what you're experiencing actually helplessness or powerlessness?
hmm,
What what does that mean? Like how again, if we break it down into its experience, what is the experience of being helpless?
it seems like it was, you know, describing what was happening at the time, a sensation in the body,
Hmm.
um, and some ideas, beliefs, interpretations of um, what those sensations were, or what they meant.
Hmm. Yeah, and if you're just really clear on this particular pattern of sensations equals the feeling of helplessness. But is it? How is that actually helpless? Can you no longer feed yourself? Can you not stand up and walk across the room? How does those sensations in the body create helplessness?
Wow, hold on a minute. Uh, I don't think that exists outside of an idea and a belief.
It does not. It is 100% a belief, and it's a very limited belief because we're we take that sensation that shows up to be the proof of this overarching aspect of ourselves. I feel helpless and powerless.
Mm-hmm.
It's triggered by an idea about one particular facet of experience. So in this case, it's like, I don't know
Hmm.
how to get Tuesday to go to school. I'm helpless and powerless. Boom. I feel this complete, overwhelming umbrella of powerlessness about my being right now.
Yeah, boy, I talk about an extreme perception.
Yeah. It's a limited idea that I can't force another person to go to school, thus, I can't move. I have absolutely no autonomy anymore. I can't do anything. I'm completely helpless and powerless.
Well, the irony is I don't have any autonomy anyway.
I know. But again, in the second Feder kind of talking, it's because, I'm sure there were periods in your life when you were a child that you literally didn't have much, power or autonomy. And something
Yeah.
happened that gave you that feeling. And it was a very similar group of sensations in the body that
Uh,
anytime it felt like you were being impacted by somebody else against your will and you couldn't do the thing that you wanted to do or felt was right, you feel these sensations. I'm locked, I'm powerless. That has just grown with you. to where, excuse me, that has grown with you to where any situation that has like that tiny little hint of that kind of I can't do the thing that I want to do brings these sensations with it, and that immediately triggers that assumption that I am just as powerless as a 3-year-old who couldn't leave the house and do stuff on their own.
Yeah.
So it's remembering I'm an adult, like a fully able-bodied adult who is in no way powerless against anything. The idea of power is itself a concept.
Yeah.
The idea of helplessness is a concept. It's a belief. It's not true. There are things in the world that you probably cannot affect, but it doesn't mean that there's an overall helplessness to the situation or to the being. Just like there isn't one overwhelming feeling of shame about, you're not a shameful being, even if there are moments of this feeling that we call shame. It doesn't it doesn't describe the entire totality of the Darrell experience.
Mm, okay.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I just the first thought was, okay, how to get this to sink in?
Yeah, yeah. Really like recognizing over and over again that anytime you have that feeling of helplessness, am I helpless? What can I do right now? It's not necessarily related to that thing that sparked it, but
Mm,
like proving that like I am not helpless. Like there is action that's happening here. There is a body that is moving and is doing stuff. It's saying stuff. It's behaving. Look into the reality of that concept of helplessness. Notice the sensations that are supposedly telling you that you're helpless. And again, have that open spaciousness around them that you can feel and recognize that these sensations are just these fleeting sensations that don't mean you are helpless. Just like the feeling of adrenaline doesn't mean you are in physical danger.
right. So it becomes a matter of questioning and challenging all of these feelings, sensations, ideas,
Yeah,
beliefs.
completely. Exactly.
Okay.
Because it's just easy assumptions. We're basically just shorthanding our way through life. We're generalizing on everything and just walking through labeling every tree as the same tree. We're labeling everything that even has a hint of an emotion that seems like something I felt before as that emotion, as opposed to recognizing this is a brand new experience that you have never felt before in exactly this way. And it does not mean the thing that the mind immediately labels it to be.
So when we are walking around in our lives and taking this stuff at face value and not inquiring into it, not questioning it, um, then we are overlooking things to our own detriment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's easy. It's easy for the brain. It doesn't use a lot of energy. We're just it's much easier to just recognize a car as a car as opposed to having to relearn what this moving thing is and all of its different, every time you see one of a different color and a different shape and model, you have to figure out what the hell it is again. That would be absolutely exhausting. So
Yeah.
we generalize, but the problem is that we do it with emotions and situations and other people, and it just becomes a very, very simple, sloppy shorthand for an actual experience. And most of us just interact through those labels and those very shallow conceptions. And that's why a lot of times when we ask people who are kind of new to doing this stuff, what is an emotion? It's just like, well, I don't know, it's just anger. It's just sadness. I don't know. Well, where's it felt? I don't know. It's just like anger. It's like, really getting into the experience of what it is doesn't even make sense because a lot of times we just interact with these things as this vague apparition of, I don't know, I just get overtaken by anger and I punch somebody. It just happens. Like I have no idea how it works. And so we're really calling into that experience of, what is actually happening in the body? Well, I don't know, it's something up here. My face gets all red and hot. Okay, well, what's happening below that? Like getting really down into the full depth of the experience of what happens in those moments. And for a lot of people, it's really very new. And then really questioning just because the body feels like, why is that anger? Just because there's like this tension building up, how is that anger? There's tension. There's a rising energy in the body. There's heat. Yeah, maybe the face feels flushed. There's blood rushing to the face. Why is that anger?
Because that's how your mind interprets it.
Exactly. And then breaking it down to what is really being experienced in this given moment. Is that feeling the exact same as every other time you have labeled yourself as being angry? And then is it really the same experience? Are there gradations? Are they very different?
Hmm.
And then we're still labeling them all as anger. And then we go into, well, why is that anger even there to begin with? Well, it's the reflection from something. Okay, well, what were you experiencing before the anger? And then we go that route. And so it's like there's like layer after layer of stuff that can be investigated that we just don't recognize because we're just living on that surface layer of assumption.
So, did it take you a long period of time to get fully, and by fully meaning, you know, in a very short period of time, someone can get where they're doing it a little bit from time to time, but to get fully into the habit of inquiring, did it take a long time to get to that point?
Honestly, no, but I was
Really?
also, yeah, it was surprisingly like it kind of clicked, I think, because, and I don't know why this is. I think my mind, for some reason, seems to be really geared to the kind of analytical. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that was part of it because it's like, as soon as it recognized that there is something here to be like investigated and broken down and experienced,
Mm-hmm.
it's like that just became the like, okay, well, let's do that with everything. And
Right.
like, nothing is off the table of really digging into it. But I say that, but it's hard because, I've been doing stuff within the realm of Buddhism and awakening and stuff for 24 or 5 years, something like that. So it's like,
Okay.
it's been a long time with peaks and valleys of, intense practice and no practice and, different types of understanding. And so it's hard to say how much at what point and when I started really getting into the like this kind of inquiry and this kind of analysis of everything. I feel like it's really like congealed and solidified, or like it did that in a pretty short amount of time. But I
Hmm.
don't know, I don't really remember in the lead up to that how much kind of introspection of that sort I might have been doing that I don't really remember. But the way like it has
Hmm.
clicked now and the way I understand it, it doesn't, it feels like it was maybe like a couple years of like really intense daily investigation.
Okay.
Um, but I can't. I wish I could say more specific because I don't know how to delineate when it really began. So I
Sure.
can't really say. But
Oh, it's even if you knew, I mean, everyone's experience is going to be different.
mm,
I just wanted to, I guess I was hoping to get some sense of, um, what to expect because it's kind of funny to me how it's still getting, it's still developing as a habit. You
yep,
know, uh, what something I mentioned earlier about, uh, when something happens and there's something that's kind of provoking a reaction and recognizing that that's just a feeling. That's just a, we're actually, that's just a sensation. Um, that's very slowly starting to happen. The other things that are along that line that I do are coming along kind of slowly, but they're coming along. So, I mean, I guess reality is if I just keep doing it, it'll take care of itself. So,
Exactly. Exactly. Because I can say like I was investigating it in terms of specifically like the panic attacks back
mhm.
20 years ago, So I mean, it was a long
Wow.
time ago that I was investigating from that aspect, but it wasn't breaking down, the experience of other emotions and all of that. I mean, that was much, much, much later. But I think when I started really doing that kind of inquiry, then I think the difference too is I really didn't have anything else going on for a couple of years. Where it was like after my mom had died and I wasn't taking care of her, it was like full-time inquiry. I mean, I was just for like 2 years, I was just basically every day. I was either meditating, inquiring, talking to people about this stuff, doing like it was just guiding, like it was like constant, 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 just being there were like no distractions from it. It was just investigation and deepening and inquiry and really trying to get as much out of every moment of this as possible. And I think that was really so pivotal in
Sure.
breaking through so much stuff. But
Yeah.
there weren't that many distractions from home life and other things that were,
Right.
taking so it was just me investigating the experience for a couple of years.
Well, yeah, sure. That would on one level that would be nice to not have any distractions, but at the same time, um, the distractions, you know, I'm not even sure I want to call them distractions, but using that term, I mean, that still is uh, one of the primary things that helps to motivate that intention in that direction. So,
Absolutely.
even though sometimes it would be nice not to have some of the forms they take, I guess I'll go ahead and take my distractions such as they are,
Yeah.
because otherwise things might be very different.
Well, that's the thing. They give you something to work with.
Right.
I was happy like during that time. I still had stuff coming up that gave me plenty of things to work with, but it
Hmm.
wasn't like, I had a lot of time to just devote to inquiring and doing this stuff. But there is like that's kind of a criticism is maybe too strong of a word, but like a caveat to the whole monastic experience is
Hmm.
that your life is largely taken care of in a lot of ways when you become, you join a monastery.
Yep.
And it's really when you get out that, if you leave, that all of a sudden you find out how much you haven't encountered while you're in there and how much work, you now have to work through. You really it's relatively easy to be enlightened when you're on a mountaintop by yourself. It's much harder when you are working a job and in a family and having,
Right.
you know, paying taxes and doing all of that other stuff to deal with. And I think there's a reason that they don't touch money that isn't just because money is somehow dirty and corrupting. I think there is so much that we put on it and so much, stress that we involve with it and all of the upkeep and everything that it really just if you thought about your day and all of the things that like you were living your life in a monastery, like taking out all of the things that give you stress day to day, they're most of the things that would be removed if you were in a monastery, right? Like all
Right.
of the difficulties that you have are really removed in that kind of cloistered situation.
Yeah.
So we can be really grateful that you have all of those things to work with because they are the ones that are giving you the deepest insight
Yeah.
that you're not going to get from just sitting
I,
at a
I
table.
agree. And it actually took me a long time. It's only been in the last, I don't know, it's been in the last year or so that 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 perspective shifted, because it used to be the sense of regret and frustration that I missed my opportunity to ordain.
Wow.
And then slowly over time it shifted. And now it's a case of, I don't know if I would want to.
No, no. There were periods where I would have wanted to too, and no more.
Well,
Uh,
and I think part of it comes from the fact that there are some of these people who are kind of fundamentalists in that way
yeah,
that have sold this idea that the only way it can be done is if you're a monastic, and
yeah,
that's just, I mean, that that myth has been completely busted.
yeah, yeah. I see real issues with that. I've seen some talks, especially in the Theravadan tradition, where
Mm-hmm.
they're very like, well, no, you might be able to get a little ways in, as a layman, but no, you have to ordain in order to really get there. And then you hear them talk about other people in their monasteries, and they are so identified, and there is so much work to be done that really gets like the ego has a very convenient place to hide when you become a monk,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, what's funny about that is that when they say those sorts of things, they're overlooking the fact that there are places in the Pali Canon where the Buddha talks about the enlightenment of a householder, whether it was something that was actually done, or one that comes to mind is a householder that he didn't get to talk to, but only briefly because they had to leave. And he said, it's a shame he didn't stay longer. I could have gotten him all the way there,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
completely.
Like, so if you
Mhm.
want to overlook that, that's fine. Seems a little too
Yeah,
convenient to me.
I know, I agree, but it's an industry.
You're right,
Keep,
it is.
keeps
I
the
remember
coffers
the,
filled.
huh? Helps.
Keeps the
Oh, yeah,
coffers
yeah.
filled. Yeah.
Well, it makes me think of I forget what it was. I just know that it was involving what's his name? Is it Joseph Goldstein? And
Mm,
someone commented on his $400 pair of shoes.
yeah, yeah,
Like, that's when I started to understand things a little more clearly. So yeah, you're right. It's an industry.
yeah, yeah. It's a shame because there's like I'm so grateful to the monastic tradition of the past for maintaining the Buddhist teachings. I mean, like
Sure.
when it was oral, I'm so grateful that there were people who are devoting their lives to maintaining these texts. Uh,
Yeah.
but there definitely are some issues within the modern day.
Oh yeah, yeah. When you see that people are arguing over whether or not women can be monks
Uh,
or bukinis, however you want to say it,
yeah,
that tells you something's amiss there. Because
yeah,
that shouldn't even be a question. You
no,
know.
no, it's absurd. Um,
Yes, it is.
you know, humans are gonna human.
That's
It,
great.
it's very unfortunate, but that is the way that we
No, you're right.
are.
Nothing we can do about that.
There really isn't. Um,
You seem like you're getting tired.
yeah, it's. I was really tired this morning for some reason, and I'm sort of like I peaked up, and now I feel like I'm starting to descend again.
Yeah, I've noticed that here in the last, I guess, 20 minutes or so, your eyes are starting to shut just a little bit. And
Uh,
so,
it's been 3 hours we've been
yes,
chatting.
it has. And I drank that entire cup, and it needs to go somewhere because it's killing me.
Yeah, I get that.
So
It's been a pleasure.
it has.
Really
It really
good.
has been. I always feel better after these.
Good. I'm glad.
And Susanna will even notice it. She'll get, you seem so much more relaxed,
Oh,
after you guys talk. Like, yeah. So, and
that's nice.
sometimes it lasts for a long period of time.
That's good. I'm really, really
Well,
happy about that.
and actually, the base state has also changed over the last year and a half. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's wonderful.
so it is great.
Amazing.
So,
So happy.
and these talks just keep they just keep deepening.
Yeah,
They just say every time I walk away from one of these now, just I'm just floored. And this stuff will just be running through my mind for days afterwards. So
excellent. Excellent. And I know I keep hearing from people how much it's like a one-to-one session for them too. So they are so grateful. If you read the comments, it's a really amazing resource for everyone too. So
yeah,
thank you.
and I saw one comment. I cannot remember what she said, but one woman commented on the most recent video, and I wish I could remember what she said because it was such high praise.
Yeah.
I was really glad to hear it because as we know, I don't have to belabor the point, but it was there was some real reluctance about being public with this.
I
So,
know.
now those sorts of things just completely eliminate any doubt about that, or any misgivings.
That is awesome. And it's super, super appreciated from me and everyone involved. So thank you.
Well,
Really.
I, I think everyone deserves the thanks, because you've made yourself available, and these people are participating.
Yep.
So it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
It does not.
So
No.
I'm grateful too.
Yeah, absolutely. That is amazing.
All right. Well,
I, I wish you luck
like
with
I said,
everything.
there's a pressing urge, so I'm going to hit the leave button.
Yep. Sounds good. But
Talk
but
to you later.
good luck with
All
everything. I'll talk to you soon. Keep
right.
me
I'll talk to you
posted.
later.
Bye.
Bye.